Hi, it's Alexis Hasselberger, time management and productivity coach. So, I did something a couple of weeks ago that was incredibly tedious, but totally worth it. It's something that I do for about 2 weeks out of every year so that I can get some insights around my time. And what is this thing that is quite tedious, but also totally worth it? It is time tracking. So, I am not one of those people that advocates that we track all of our time, all of the time. I don't know, I couldn't even handle that. I don't know how lawyers and things like that do it, but they do, they manage it. I like to track my time just about 2 weeks out of every year. And the reason that I want to do that is because I want to get a kind of baseline. I want to get a level set of where I am with where I want to be. And this is also something that I do with all of my clients right at the beginning when we start working together. We track some time to figure out what the baseline is. And there are a number of different reasons that we want to do this, but there are really four key reasons why time tracking can be a really valuable tool that you do some of the time, not all of the time. So, what are these four reasons? So the first one is that when we track our time, because time is so subjective, it's like when it's going, like when we're doing something really fun, when we're with our friends, when we're with our kids and they're not crying, it's super fun. And so it goes really fast. And we feel like, wow, that time just flew by. And when we're doing something super boring, like maybe taxes, I don't know, maybe that's just me, but when I'm doing something boring, it seems like time takes forever, right? So if I were to ask you, where does your time go? You would give me an answer and you would think that answer would be true. And I would be willing to bet that that answer is not entirely true just because, time is subjective. And so it's really hard to gauge it without actually tracking it. So back to these four reasons. What are these four reasons that we really want to think about time tracking and how this can be a valuable tool? And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I learned in my time tracking experience. So, one of the things that we want to do, or one of the reasons that we want to track our time, is simply because it helps us to identify things that we can stop doing. Like, are we doing non essential things? Are we doing really time consuming things that we could delegate, that we could outsource? Are we doing some things that we could just stop doing and really there would be no loss at all? Maybe this sometimes happens, right? Another reason that we want to track our time is that we want to see if our estimates are accurate. So we might be saying, hey, I'm going to allot this amount of time to do this thing. And how accurate is that going to be? Now, big spoiler here, which maybe isn't a spoiler, not very accurate. Like most of us are not great at time estimation. And so when you track your time, it helps you to figure out how off your estimates are, which helps you to make better estimates in the future. Now, another reason that we might want to track our time is that in the moment while we're tracking, it helps us to stay focused. So in the wise words of Peter Drucker, what gets measured gets managed. And if you've ever done any other kind of tracking, maybe you've done food tracking or something like that, just like how if you are a little less likely to eat that cupcake if you have to write down that cupcake, we all have time cupcakes too, right? Cupcakes might be Instagram scrolling or TikTok or other things that like are nice, but maybe not the best use of our time. And so when we're tracking, we're a little bit less likely to do that. Now, of course, we're not tracking all the time, so this maybe isn't gonna mold into all the time. We're going to be more mindful of that, but it's something that can help us to determine how much of that kind of stuff that we're doing. And then lastly, when we track our time, it helps us answer some questions about how well our time is aligned with our goals and our values. And this can be really hard data to see, right? Because sometimes we are just going along with life, we're doing the things that are coming at us, and we realize, our time is really not aligned with our goals. It is not aligned with our values. But you know what? It's good to know that, right? We don't want to be scared of that information. We don't want to be scared of that data. We want to know that because when we know that, then we can actually take action, right? We can make some changes. So I want to share with you, what I learned in this most recent time tracking that I did. And so as I said, I do about 2 weeks out of every year. I usually do it, I don't know, in the first quarter of the year. I don't worry too much about trying to find a typical week, right? There's no such thing. I just start where I am. And I want to share with you the highlights of what I learned and what are some of the things that I might want to change or that I'm thinking about changing around some of these things. So in terms of big buckets, a big surprise to me was the childcare bucket. This came in for me at about 30 minutes a day, which seems strange because I do have two children. And I think that the thing that I really noticed is that as my kids have gotten older, they're preteens and teens now. they just are so much more self-sufficient. And so actually, I spent a lot of time with them still, but I was reclassifying that time much differently than I used to when they were little. When they were little, a lot of the time, most of the time that I was spending with my kids was classified as childcare. And now most of the time that I'm spending with my kids is actually classified as like leisure, spending time with friends and family, because they are more self-sufficient now. And so that was just kind of a big shocker to me, and one that I thought, this kids are growing up, right? It's happening. Now, the next one that's kind of a big one is around chores. And so I will preface this by saying that my kids do a lot of the chores in my household. Like, they're responsible for cleaning the kitchen, dealing with the garbage, the recycle, the compost. They were responsible for the plants at one point, but why did that come back on my list? I'm not exactly sure. So one thing to think about. So I had about an hour's worth of chores every day in my time tracking data. And this, I just want to dive a little deeper into, because I didn't feel like I was doing that many chores. And I know that my kids are doing most of the chores. And so I actually want to maybe spend a week tracking what chores I'm actually doing, instead of just tracking the bucket of chores, track what those chores are. Because if I have a little bit more granular data there, I might be able to figure out how to offload some of those, how to get them done in a different way. Because really, in my ideal world, I'm not doing any chores, right? I don't know how realistic that is, but definitely want it to be less than an hour a day. Then we have the category of goofing off, which I just consider like any kind of scrolling we're doing on our phone, anytime we're, doing something that we haven't intentionally chosen to do for the value that it brings, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be productive, doesn't necessarily, have to be leisure, but it's like goofing off is just kind of this unintentional stuff that we're doing. And so this came in at about 37 minutes a day for me. And what I really think is this is probably a lot more on the weekends and less during the weekdays. And really, this is probably just me watching TikTok. I am not really a big social media person other than that, but I will say TikTok is like the only form of social media that has ever been like insanely compelling to me. So I have some real bright line rules around that. I am not allowed to open it during the weekday at all. I'm not allowed to open it on weekday nights, because I know I'll probably go to sleep too late if I do, but I do a fair amount of that on the weekend. And I consider that like true leisure time, because I don't know, I just love it. Then we have actual leisure time. So outside of the goofing off, I'm considering these to be things like spending times with friends and family, reading, which I do a lot of, crafting. I'm currently crocheting a lot. So like all of those things that I do just for me. And I was really pleased with this. It came in at about 5 hours a day. And I recently wrote an article about how much leisure time we need during the day based off of a study about that same thing. And that study showed that we need about 2 to 5 leisure hours a day to feel like really satisfied with that. So I was really happy to be on the upper end of that. And I also think that, just to level set here, I'm probably getting most of that on the weekends, because my weekends are pretty much reserved for leisure. And I'm getting less of that during the weekday when we've got a lot of other things going on. So I'm probably getting about 2 to 3 hours on the weekdays and then a lot more on the weekends. But I'm pretty happy about that amount of leisure time. Then we have exercise. So I'm getting about 20 minutes a day of exercise. I think that it's probably happening more like every other day for 45 minutes. Like if I look at my calendar, that's what it looks like. And so I'm not really exercising every single day, but it does work out to be about 20 minutes a day. This is an area where I would like to make some changes. I would like to increase this a little bit. Maybe I can get it up to 30 minutes a day or even 40 minutes a day. I think that would make me feel better overall. And so I'm going to work that into my schedule. I'm going to use baby steps. I'm going to maybe add one more workout per week and see how that goes. And if I can incorporate that, I might add more. Then we get to sleep. So I am sleeping about 7 hours and 45 minutes on average per day, which I was pretty happy about. When my kids were much younger, I slept much less, like most people. But sleep has been a real priority for me over the last, 5-10 years, as I came out of those super baby days. And so I've really been trying to prioritize that. So while, 7.5 to 8 hours sounds great, I also just want to come clean and say, it's a lot more on the weekends and less during the week. So I'm probably sleeping about, if I look at the data, 6.5 to 7 hours on the weekdays, and then maybe 10 hours on the weekends. I love to sleep in when I can. I'm a night person. It's really hard for me to wake up in the mornings. It's also really hard for me to go to sleep at night. And so I am kind of sleep catching up on the weekends, averaging out to about 7 hours and 45 minutes during the week. And so I have been trying to think about ways to get this more consistent. That's something that I would like. I don't want to just be catching up on sleep on the weekends. I want to be more consistent. And so one thing that I've been experimenting with since I did this tracking is getting a little nap in the mornings. So I have to be up at 7 a.m. to get my kids breakfast and out the door. But then my first meeting is usually not until 9. And so what I've been experimenting with is getting up from 7 to 7:30, getting them out the door, and then taking a nap from around 7:30 to 8:30. This has been better. It's not perfect. I'd love to get that sleep all at one stretch, but I also know that in the past, trying to get myself to get my bedtime earlier to change my body clock has been really, really difficult. And it's something that I might be able to do, but it really goes against kind of what my body wants to do. And so I'm trying this napping in the morning thing, and we're going to see how that goes. And then lastly, work. So while I did track work time, much more granularly in terms of how much am I spending doing emails or sales work or, client directed work, things like that. On the whole, I'm working about 7.5 hours a day, 5 days a week. And you might think, oh, that sounds fantastic. I would love to do that. But I found for myself, this is actually a little bit more than I want to be working. In the past, I have found that 30 hours a week is really my sweet spot. And I know that this is an absolute luxury and a privilege. And it's something that's been a trade-off for me. So even back when I worked for other people as a W-2 employee, I had worked out with a couple of companies that I worked with a deal so that I could work 75% time and receive 75% pay. And so that just worked out much better for me, especially when I had little kids. In terms of that trade-off, I was willing to accept the kind of money for time trade-off. And quite frankly, I'm still doing that in my own business, right? It's not like you can work less and still have all of the other benefits of that. So it's the same thing, but I would actually like to get that down a little bit. So maybe I can cut off a couple of hours a week. And so what I'm going to be doing with that data is I'm going to be adding in some calendar blocks to try to help me to reduce the amount of time I'm spending during the workday by putting some actual barriers in my calendar as a reminder for myself. Will it be quick and easy to do this? Probably not. It will be done in little baby steps over time. But that is what I wanted to share with you. I know this is a real deep dive. So if anyone is still here, if you're still here and listening, let me know. Let me know in the comments. I don't know what stuck out to you. And have you ever tracked your time? What did you learn? And then what changes did you make? Or have I inspired you to perhaps track your time for a week or so and just see what you learn and see if there are any small changes that you can make based on having access to that real data? And as always, make sure to subscribe if you're not subscribed already. That way you will get new videos in your feed every single Monday.
Hey guys, it's the video editor here. Just like she said, make sure to subscribe, and I'm also going to put up this analytic, and it says that only about 25% of the people that watch our videos are actually subscribed. So if you're watching our videos, just subscribe.